Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Thank you for your patience in being with us today. Just to follow up, obviously, a lot of elected officials and politicians talk about the increase in student loan debt, and I think it's a very valuable topic and one that we should spend even more time discussing. But the one piece that seems to be missing is that, in spite of a lot of politicians in Washington talking about the problems associated with the high amounts of student loan debt, I also think students are shocked when they find out that the programs in Washington are charging the rates that they are, especially at a time when rates out in the private market are fairly low. So if you could just briefly summarize collectively what is higher education doing to lobby Washington to look at the interest rates that they're charging on these loans and to make some significant reforms.
Well, okay, so we actively work on these areas in any single case in which it causes more cost for our students and you know, make us less successful in getting our ideas to the marketplace, which is a current part of the legislation. This is a very active part of what we do. And I would also say one of the more interesting things is there's just a new bipartisan report out there on the cost of regulation of higher education and the degree to which the growth in administrative positions in universities can be directly tied to the fact that we have laws that are passed that end up giving us 300-page forms to fill out to describe you know, what we're doing and how we're doing it.
But how does that relate to the interest rates of student loan programs?
It was just another
I
example.
get the cost.
It's just another example of the cost for students that ends up being passed on to students. So interest rates, everything from interest rates to patents to regulation that ends up costing students more.
I'm sorry if I didn't narrow the question enough. I'm specifically talking about the interest rates being charged by these federal programs, not cost drivers. We could spend all day talking, and I think we've talked about a lot of those cost drivers, but what are institutions of higher education doing to lobby Washington to find different ways or to make reforms for those that are paying overtime responsibly, to not be paying 6% and 7% and 8% interest? That's really the heart of my question, if we could briefly summarize that.
Yeah, I mean, the national organizations in higher education, American Council on Education, I met with last week, the direct student loan program is a fixed, and you're correct, it is above a market rate. Now, the discussion we had in D.C. about this, though, is given where interest rates appear to be going, are you better to have your students on a adjustable rate, which would be the alternative, or to stay with what at this point in time is a relatively high fixed rate, but 5 years from now could be my first mortgage was 12% back in the early 1980s, and was a good rate. So not knowing where interest rates are going, are we better to stay with the fixed rate, or should we be pushing for an adjustable rate loan? That issue is ongoing. That discussion is ongoing.
I didn't know. You looked like you were going to follow up.
I was just going to say that the complexity here is there's multiple student loan programs at the federal level. The national associations are quite actively engaged, and in addition to whether you go fixed and how you structure it, fixed versus adjustable, there's also this question of risk, and the federal government programs are largely turning to the private sector, for these loans, and one of the questions is how are they collateralized? One of the reasons the rates are higher is that they're unsecured loans, and so.
I understand. And if we want to help lower debt, one way that we could do it is look at a rate that is significantly higher than the marketplace. One follow-up question, that something you had mentioned, SATs scores and how they relate to admissions. In 2015, are SAT and ACT scores still the only real standardized test that your institutions use for accepting students?
Yes.
And then could you maybe just follow up to, even though that's still the case as it was in 2002 when I went to college, as K through 12 is adding on Keystone exams, PSSAs, and we've heard a lot of frustrated parents and students about these high-stake testing, standardized tests, that have no bearing clearly, and I'm not trying to put higher education versus K through 12, but I'm trying to expose the frayed link between the two when they add on all these standardized tests, but colleges aren't even looking at it. Can you comment if that money would be more wisely spent somewhere else, seeing how the standardized test that's been around for a while is still the one that we use?
Well, I think these testing instruments have different purposes. So, to try to leverage what's happening in the K through 12 side, what I will say is, we probably all take a blended look at admissions where we're looking at more than just standardized test scores. And we all know they're not perfect. Their value is that they're one of the few things that are common. And so they're an important calibration point across what's, frankly, an enormous diversity of approaches within high schools and other institutions. So you need something to sort of, be able to factor those other criteria in.
And I would agree. And what we can do to strengthen the link between K through 12 and higher education, I think, is a noble cause. And when kids are still going to school 181 days, but they're spending 11 days of standardized testing, clearly we have less instructional days, and we would be wise to fix that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.